The sun dipped low over the dusty horizon of Silver Creek as Sophia Calloway clutched her wedding dress, once pristine white, now bearing the marks of a desperate journey. Her fingers trembled as she pushed open the door to the town's only bakery, the smell of fresh bread making her empty stomach twist painfully. 3 days without a proper meal had left her hollow-eyed and desperate, with nothing to trade but the last remnant of a life that no longer existed. The year was 1876, and the promise of a new life in the West had turned to ashes for Sophia. At 22, she had already experienced more heartache than most endure in a lifetime. Her fiancé had died of typhoid fever just 2 weeks before their wedding day, leaving her alone with mounting debts and a beautiful dress she'd never wear. With nowhere else to turn, she had traveled west on the last of her savings, hoping to stay with a distant cousin who, upon her arrival, she discovered had moved on months ago. "Excuse me." Sophia's voice was barely audible as she approached the baker, a portly man with flour dusting his apron. "I was wondering if perhaps—" She swallowed hard, fighting back tears of humiliation. "I have this dress. It's fine silk and lace from back east. I thought perhaps I could trade it for some bread." The baker looked at her with pity, then at the carefully wrapped bundle in her arms. "Miss, that's mighty fine of you to offer, but I've got no use for a wedding dress, and neither does my wife." He sighed, glancing at the near-empty display case. "End of day, not much left anyhow." Sophia felt the room spin slightly. Her last hope was slipping away. "Please," she whispered, unwrapping the bundle to reveal the dress, its pearl beading catching the late afternoon light. "It's worth far more than bread. I just need something to eat." The bell above the door jingled, and a tall figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the setting sun. The baker's expression changed immediately. "Afternoon, Mr. Westcott," he called out cheerfully. The usual. Sophia didn't turn around, too focused on carefully rewrapping her dress, trying to hide the evidence of her desperation. "That'd be fine, Joe," came a deep voice from behind her. Boots scuffed against the wooden floor as the newcomer approached the counter, stopping when he noticed Sophia. "Madam," he acknowledged with a slight tip of his hat. Sophia nodded quickly, clutching the bundle to her chest. "Good day, sir," she murmured, turning to leave, her cheeks burning with shame. "Wait," the man said, his voice gentle but commanding. "Joe, what's going on here?" The baker shrugged uncomfortably. "Lady was trying to trade her wedding dress for bread, told her I can't use such a thing." Sophia wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. She kept her eyes downcast, studying the worn toes of her boots. The stranger was quiet for a long moment. "Miss, look at me," he finally said. Reluctantly, Sophia raised her eyes to meet his. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 28 or 29, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but well-made, a black vest over a crisp white shirt, worn denim pants, and a gun belt that had seen use but was well-maintained. "Cole Westcott," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "Ranch owner just north of town." "Sophia Calloway," she replied automatically, her mother's lessons in etiquette still instinctive despite her circumstances. Cole's eyes moved from her face to the bundle in her arms, then back again. "Keep the dress," he said firmly. "You'll wear it for me." Sophia's mouth fell open in shock. "I beg your pardon," a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Perhaps that came out wrong." He turned to the baker. "Joe, give the lady whatever she wants and put it on my account, and throw in one of those apple pies my housekeeper is so fond of." Before Sophia could protest, Cole tipped his hat again. "Miss Calloway, I'm not proposing marriage on the spot, though that would make quite the tale. What I am offering is a job. My housekeeper needs help, and you look like you could use employment." The dress comment was merely. He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Let's call it a good luck charm, a promise that better days are ahead for you." Sophia stood frozen, uncertain if this was real or if hunger had finally driven her to hallucinate. "A job," she repeated. "Room and board included," Cole confirmed. "Decent wage, too. You can start tomorrow if you're willing." The baker placed a large parcel on the counter, wrapped in brown paper and string. "Here you go, miss. Fresh bread, some cheese, ham, and Mrs. Westcott's favorite apple pie." Sophia looked from the food to Cole and back again. "Why would you help a stranger?" Cole's expression softened slightly. Because someone once did the same for me when I needed it most. He gestured to the parcel. Take it, no strings attached. If you want the job, be at the Silver Creek General Store at noon tomorrow. I'll have someone bring you out to the ranch. He tipped his hat one final time and headed for the door. Mr. Westcott, Sophia called after him, finding her voice at last. Thank you. He paused in the doorway, the setting sun creating a halo of gold around his silhouette. Thank me by keeping that dress, Miss Calloway. Something tells me you'll need it someday. With that, he was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of leather and pine in his wake. Sophia stared at the door long after it closed, the weight of the food package in her hands feeling like salvation. For the first time in months, hope flickered in her chest, fragile as a candle flame, but stubbornly refusing to be extinguished. That evening, in the small room she'd rented with the last of her coins, Sophia sat on the edge of the bed eating fresh bread and cheese more slowly than she wanted to, knowing her shrunken stomach would rebel if she rushed. As she savored each bite, she carefully unfolded her wedding dress and spread it across the bed. The ivory silk gleamed in the lamplight, the delicate lace overlay and pearl beading still as beautiful as the day she'd first tried it on in her parents' home in Boston. It seemed a lifetime ago now. She ran her fingers over the fabric, remembering how proud her mother had been, how her father had teared up at the sight of her in it. Keep it, she whispered, echoing Cole Westcott's words. You'll wear it for me. What an odd thing for a stranger to say. Yet there had been something in his eyes, not pity, which she had grown to recognize and despise, but something deeper. Understanding, perhaps, as if he too knew what it meant to lose everything. Sophia carefully refolded the dress and wrapped it in the protective muslin she'd carried it in across half the country. Tomorrow would bring a new chapter. Whether it led to better days or more disappointment remained to be seen, but tonight, at least, she would sleep with a full stomach and a spark of hope. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the threadbare curtains of Sophia's rented room. For the first time in weeks, she woke without the gnawing pain of hunger. The remainder of the bread and cheese made a simple but satisfying breakfast as she contemplated the day ahead. Her worldly possessions fit into a single carpetbag, a few changes of clothes, a hairbrush, a small Bible that had belonged to her grandmother, and of course, the wedding dress. She dressed in her most serviceable outfit, a brown skirt and white blouse, both showing signs of repeated wearing and washing, but still presentable. Her honey-brown hair, once her pride, she twisted into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. By 11:30, Sophia stood outside the Silver Creek General Store, her carpetbag at her feet. The town was busier than she'd seen it during her few days there, with wagons rumbling down the main street and cowboys ambling in and out of the saloon across the way. Miss Calloway. Sophia turned to find a young man approaching, perhaps 17 or 18, with a shock of red hair beneath a well-worn hat. Yes, that's me, she confirmed. Name's Tobias, madam. I work for Mr. Westcott. He touched the brim of his hat respectfully. He sent me to fetch you if you're still interested in the position. I am, Sophia said firmly, picking up her carpetbag. Tobias reached for it. Let me get that for you, miss. Wagon's just over here. He led her to a sturdy buckboard wagon with the Circle W brand painted on its side. After helping her up to the seat, Tobias climbed up beside her and took the reins. It's about an hour's ride to the ranch, he explained as they pulled away from the store. Mr. Westcott would have come himself, but there was trouble with one of the herds. Mountain lions spooked the cattle and they broke through a fence line. I see, Sophia nodded, though in truth, ranch life was completely foreign to her. Have you worked for Mr. Westcott long? Going on 3 years now, Tobias said proudly. He took me on when no one else would. I was just a scrawny kid stealing food to survive after my pa died in a mining accident. Mr. Westcott caught me trying to snatch eggs from his henhouse. He grinned at the memory. Instead of having me whipped or thrown in jail, he sat me down, fed me proper, and offered me a job. That was very kind of him, Sophia remarked, her curiosity about her mysterious benefactor growing. That's the kind of man he is, Tobias nodded. Fair but firm, expects honest work but treats his people right. Mrs. Haggerty, she's the housekeeper you'll be helping. She's been with him since he first bought the ranch 7 years ago. She's getting on in years now, needs the help, though she'd never admit it. As they left the town behind, the landscape opened up into rolling plains dotted with sagebrush, and the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking the path of a creek or spring. In the distance, blue mountains rose against the horizon, their peaks still capped with snow despite the late spring warmth. "It's beautiful," Sophia breathed, drinking in the vast openness so different from the crowded streets of Boston. "Wait till you see the ranch," Tobias said proudly. "Prettiest spread in the territory, if you ask me." True to Tobias's word, about an hour later they crested a gentle rise, and the Circle W ranch spread out before them. A sprawling two-story house of weathered wood and native stone stood nestled against a backdrop of hills, with a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings arranged around it. Cottonwoods shaded the yard, and a creek wound its way past the property, its banks lush with greenery. "Oh my," Sophia couldn't help the exclamation. After days of dusty travel and despair, the ranch looked like an oasis. Tobias beamed at her reaction. Home sweet home. Mr. Westcott built the main house himself with help from the hands. Added onto it twice now as the ranch grew. He guided the wagon down the sloping road toward the ranch. As they approached, Sophia saw activity everywhere, cowboys working with horses in a corral, smoke rising from what must be a smithy, women hanging laundry on lines stretched between poles. They pulled up in front of the main house, and Tobias hopped down, coming around to help Sophia descend from the wagon. "Mrs. Haggerty will be expecting you," he said, handing her the carpet bag. "Just go on up to the door and knock." With a deep breath to steady her nerves, Sophia walked up the path to the house. The front porch was wide and welcoming, with several rocking chairs suggesting it was a place meant for relaxation at day's end. She raised her hand and knocked firmly on the door. It swung open almost immediately to reveal a plump, gray-haired woman with keen blue eyes and flour-dusted hands. "You must be Miss Calloway," the woman said, looking Sophia up and down with an appraising gaze. "I'm Edith Haggerty. Come in, come in. No sense letting flies in while we stand about." Sophia stepped into a spacious entryway with a polished wooden floor and a staircase leading to the upper floor. The house smelled of baking bread and something savory stew, perhaps. "Mr. Westcott said you'd be coming," Mrs. Haggerty continued, leading the way toward the back of the house. "He tells me you're from back east." "Yes, Boston originally," Sophia confirmed, following the older woman. Mrs. Haggerty nodded. "Well, ranch life is different, but you look like you've got a sensible head on your shoulders. The work isn't complicated, helping with meals, cleaning, laundry, that sort of thing. I do the cooking still, mind you, but my hands aren't what they used to be for the heavier tasks." They entered a large, airy kitchen dominated by a massive cast iron stove and a long wooden table that could easily seat 12. Through the back windows, Sophia could see a vegetable garden and a chicken coop beyond. "Your room will be upstairs, next to mine," Mrs. Haggerty explained. "Small but comfortable enough. Meals are taken here in the kitchen, except when Mr. Westcott has guests, then we serve in the dining room. Breakfast at 5, dinner at noon, supper at 6. The hands eat in the bunkhouse, but we prepare their food too." The older woman paused, studying Sophia's face. "Mr. Westcott said you've fallen on hard times." Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Yes, madam. My fiancé passed away shortly before our wedding. I came west hoping to stay with family, but my plans didn't work out as expected." Mrs. Haggerty's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss, child. We all have our stories out here. No shame in needing a fresh start." She gestured around the kitchen. "This is a good place for that. Hard work, but fair treatment and respect. Mr. Westcott runs a tight ship, but he's a good man." "So I've been told," Sophia said. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." "Well then," Mrs. Haggerty nodded decisively, "let's get you settled in, and then you can help me finish preparing dinner. We've got 20 hungry men to feed, and they don't take kindly to waiting when they come in from a morning's work." The next few hours passed in a whirl of activity, as Sophia was shown to her room, indeed small but clean and comfortable, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window overlooking the creek, and then put straight to work peeling potatoes, chopping vegetables, and kneading dough for the evening's biscuits. By noon, the kitchen was filled with the mouth-watering aromas of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple cobbler. Mrs. Haggerty proved to be a patient teacher, correcting Sophia's technique when needed but otherwise seeming pleased with her new assistant's willingness to learn. "Ring that bell on the back porch," Mrs. Haggerty instructed, nodding toward a large brass bell hanging just outside the door. "3 times for dinner." Sophia did as instructed, the clear, resonant sound carrying across the ranch yard. Almost immediately, men began making their way toward the bunkhouse, where Sophia had earlier helped deliver large pots of stew and baskets of bread. "Mr. Westcott takes his meals here in the house," Mrs. Haggerty explained, ladling stew into a large bowl. "He should be along shortly." As if on cue, the back door opened, and Cole Westcott stepped inside, removing his hat as he entered. He looked even more imposing than Sophia remembered, tall and broad-shouldered, with a day's worth of stubble darkening his jaw. His clothes were dusty, and there was a tear in his shirt sleeve, but he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Mrs. Haggerty," he greeted the housekeeper warmly, "something smells delicious, as always." His gaze shifted to Sophia and a smile touched his lips. "Miss Calloway, I'm glad you decided to join us." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Westcott," Sophia replied, suddenly very conscious of her mussed hair and the flour that probably dusted her cheeks. "Cole, please," he insisted. "We're not overly formal around here." He moved to a basin in the corner and washed his hands, then took a seat at the head of the table. Mrs. Haggerty placed the bowl of stew before him, along with a plate of bread still warm from the oven. "Miss Calloway made the biscuits," she informed him, with a nod of approval toward Sophia. Cole broke one open, steam rising from its fluffy interior, and took a bite. "Excellent," he declared. "You found your calling, Miss Calloway." Sophia couldn't help but smile at the compliment. "Sophia, please," she returned his earlier courtesy. "And thank you, my mother was an excellent baker, she taught me well." "Sit, both of you," Cole gestured to the other chairs. "No sense in standing while I eat." As they shared the noon meal, Cole asked Sophia about her journey west, carefully avoiding any mention of the circumstances of their first meeting. She found herself telling him about Boston, her father's work as a lawyer, her mother's involvement in various charitable societies. She did not mention her fiancé or the dress, and neither did he. In turn, he told her a little about the ranch, 5,000 acres, 300 head of cattle, 20 full-time hands, and more during the busy seasons. He'd bought the land 7 years earlier when it was little more than an abandoned homestead and built it into one of the most successful operations in the territory. "It was luck, mostly," he said modestly. "Good timing, good land, and good people willing to work hard." "Mr. Westcott doesn't mention his own hard work," Mrs. Haggerty interjected, giving Sophia a meaningful look. "I've never seen a man put in more hours or care more about his people and his animals." Cole looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Speaking of work," he said, rising from the table, "I should get back to it. Those fences won't mend themselves." He paused, looking at Sophia. "Thank you for the excellent biscuits, Sophia. I hope you'll find the Circle W to your liking." "I'm sure I will," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Thank you again for everything." He nodded once, a small smile playing at his lips, then replaced his hat and headed out the door. "Well," Mrs. Haggerty said after he'd gone, "that's the most I've heard him talk at dinner in months. You must have made quite an impression yesterday." Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He was very kind to me when I was in need. I'm grateful, that's all." Mrs. Haggerty gave her a knowing look but didn't press further. "Come on then, these dishes won't wash themselves, and we've got bread to bake for supper." The days that followed fell into a rhythm for Sophia. Up before dawn to help prepare breakfast, then a morning filled with cleaning, baking, and laundry. Afternoons brought more cooking, mending, and occasionally helping in the vegetable garden. The work was hard but satisfying, and for the first time in months, Sophia slept deeply each night, too tired for the nightmares that had plagued her since her fiancé's death. Cole Westcott remained something of an enigma. He was unfailingly polite, stopping to chat briefly at meals, asking about her day, sometimes sharing news from town or stories about the ranch's early days. But there was a careful distance to his manner, as if he was deliberately keeping himself apart. From the ranch hands and Mrs. Haggerty, Sophia gleaned pieces of his story. He had come west from Philadelphia as a young man, worked as a cowhand, and then foreman on several ranches before saving enough to buy his own land. He was respected throughout the territory for his fair dealings and generosity in hard times. But there was something else, a sadness that occasionally shadowed his eyes, especially when he thought no one was looking. 2 weeks after her arrival at the Circle W, Sophia was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Cole riding in, his expression grim. He dismounted near the bunkhouse, where several of the hands were gathered, and began speaking to them in low, urgent tones. Within minutes, the men were saddling fresh horses and checking their weapons. Concerned, Sophia hurried back to the house, finding Mrs. Haggerty packing food into saddlebags. "What's happening?" she asked, helping to wrap bread and cheese without being asked. "Rustlers," Mrs. Haggerty replied tersely. "They hit the Marshall place last night, stole 30 head, and shot 2 hands who tried to stop them. Mr. Westcott and the boys are riding out to help track them." "Is it dangerous?" Sophia couldn't keep the worry from her voice. Mrs. Haggerty's hands paused in their work. "Could be. These aren't ordinary rustlers from the sound of it. The Marshall hands who were shot. One didn't make it. Word is it's the Blackwood gang. They've been moving north, causing trouble all the way from Texas." A cold knot formed in Sophia's stomach. She had heard whispers about the Blackwood gang, even in town, ruthless outlaws who left a trail of death behind them. The back door opened, and Cole stepped inside, a rifle in his hand. "Mrs. Haggerty, we'll need enough provisions for 3 days, just to be safe." "Already packing them," the housekeeper nodded toward the saddlebags. Cole's eyes met Sophia's, noting her worried expression. "It's just a precaution," he assured her. "We'll likely pick up their trail and alert the marshal in Silver Creek. No need to fret." "Of course," Sophia nodded, trying to match his calm demeanor. "Is there anything else you need?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Pray for good weather and clear tracks," he said. "And perhaps one of your biscuits for the trail. They've become something of a favorite among the men." Sophia quickly wrapped several still warm biscuits in a clean cloth and handed them to him. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and she felt a small jolt at the contact. "Please be careful," she said softly. "Always am," he promised, tucking the biscuits into his saddlebag. He paused at the door. "Keep the house locked at night until we return. Tobias and old Sam will stay behind to keep an eye on things." With that, he was gone. Minutes later, Sophia watched from the porch as Cole and 15 of his men rode out, heading south toward the Marshall Ranch. She stood there long after the dust from their horses had settled, an unfamiliar ache in her chest. "He'll be fine," Mrs. Haggerty said, coming to stand beside her. "That man survived worse than a few rustlers." "I'm sure he will," Sophia agreed, turning back toward the house. "We should finish those shirts I was mending. The men will need clean clothes when they return." The next 2 days passed with agonizing slowness. Sophia threw herself into her work, scrubbing floors until her hands were raw, baking enough bread and pies to feed an army, anything to keep her mind off the dangers Cole and his men might be facing. On the 3rd day, as dusk was falling, Tobias burst into the kitchen where Sophia and Mrs. Haggerty were preparing supper. "Riders coming," he announced breathlessly. "It's them." Sophia's heart leaped to her throat as she followed Mrs. Haggerty and Tobias onto the porch. In the fading light, she could make out a group of horsemen approaching slowly, too slowly. And there seemed to be fewer than had left. As they drew closer, Sophia could see that some men were slumped in their saddles, clearly injured. Others were leading horses with bodies draped across them, cattle recovered from the rustlers. She hoped not men. Cole rode at the front, his face grim beneath the dust and what appeared to be dried blood. When he saw the 3 figures waiting on the porch, he raised a hand in weary greeting. "Get hot water and bandages ready," he called as they approached. "We've got wounded." The next hours were a blur of activity. 3 men had bullet wounds, none life-threatening, thankfully, but serious enough to require immediate attention. Mrs. Haggerty revealed herself to be skilled at treating such injuries, directing Sophia to help clean wounds, apply poultices, and bind bandages. Cole himself had a deep gash along his ribs that needed stitching, but he insisted on seeing to his men first. By the time Sophia finally sat him down in the kitchen to tend to his wound, it was well past midnight, and exhaustion was etched in every line of his face. "This needs cleaning," she said, eyeing the jagged tear in his flesh with concern. "It could easily become infected." "Do what you need to," he said wearily, wincing as she helped him remove his shirt. Sophia tried to maintain a professional demeanor as she worked, but it was difficult not to notice the hard planes of his chest, the numerous scars that told stories of past injuries, the way his muscles tensed under her touch. She cleaned the wound carefully, grateful for the basic medical knowledge her mother had insisted she learn. "This will hurt," she warned as she prepared to stitch the wound closed. "I'm afraid we've used all the whiskey for the others." Cole gave a short laugh that turned into a grimace. "I've had worse, believe me." He remained stoically silent as she worked, his only reaction an occasional sharp intake of breath when the needle hit a particularly sensitive spot. Sophia worked as quickly and neatly as she could, aware of his pain despite his attempts to hide it. "What happened out there?" she asked, partly to distract him, partly because she needed to know. "We caught up to them yesterday morning," Cole said, his voice tight. "6 men, just as mean as their reputation suggested. They'd split up the cattle, but we managed to recover most of them." He paused as she tied off another stitch. "They didn't surrender easily. 2 of them are dead, 1 wounded. The others escaped, but the marshal from Silver Creek is on their trail with a posse." "And your injuries?" Sophia prompted, dabbing away fresh blood, "got into a fight with one of them." "He had a knife." Cole's jaw tightened. "I had a gun. He lost." The flat statement sent a chill down Sophia's spine, reminding her that this gentle man who had shown her such kindness was also capable of violence when necessary. The West was still wild, still dangerous, and men like Cole Westcott had to be hard to survive. "There," she said finally, cutting the last thread. "It's not my finest needlework, but it should hold." "Thank you," Cole said, looking down at her handiwork with approval. "You've got steady hands." "My mother insisted I learn basic medical care. She said a woman never knows when such skills might be needed." Sophia began applying a salve to the stitched wound. She was right, it seems. Cole watched her face as she worked, his gray eyes intent. "You're a remarkable woman, Sophia Calloway." The compliment caught her off guard, and she fumbled with the bandage she was unrolling. "I'm simply doing what needs to be done." "No," he shook his head slightly. "That's just it. Most people do what's easy or what benefits them. You do what's right, even when it's hard. Even when you yourself are suffering." Sophia kept her eyes on her task, uncomfortable with his praise and the way it made her pulse quicken. "You don't know me well enough to make such judgments, Mr. Westcott." "Cole," he reminded her gently, "and perhaps I see more than you think." She secured the bandage around his torso, her fingers brushing against his warm skin. "There, you should rest now. The wound needs time to heal." He caught her hand as she withdrew it, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "Thank you, Sophia. Not just for this, but for everything you've done since coming here. The ranch feels different with you in it." Sophia's breath caught in her throat at the intensity in his eyes, the warmth of his hand around hers. For a moment she thought he might say more, might even. But then he released her hand and carefully stood up. "You're right about rest," he said, his voice returning to its usual calm tone. "It's been a long few days for all of us." "Of course," Sophia nodded, gathering the medical supplies and soiled cloths. "Good night, Cole. Good night, Sophia." He paused at the kitchen door. "I meant what I said, you know, about the dress. Better days are coming for you." With that enigmatic statement, he left, his footsteps receding up the stairs to his bedroom. Sophia remained in the kitchen for a long time after he'd gone, her mind replaying his words, the feel of his hand on hers, the look in his eyes that had seemed to see straight through to her soul. Something was shifting between them, something unexpected and potentially dangerous to her hard-won composure. "Be careful, Sophia," she whispered to herself as she finally climbed the stairs to her own room. "You came here to rebuild your life, not to lose your heart again." But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't help wondering if perhaps those 2 paths might not be as separate as she'd believed. In the weeks that followed, life at the Circle W slowly returned to normal. The wounded men recovered, the stolen cattle were integrated back into the herd, and the daily rhythms of ranch life resumed. Summer settled over the land, bringing long, hot days and brief, violent thunderstorms that swept across the plains like divine tantrums. Sophia found herself watching Cole more closely than before, noticing things she had previously overlooked, the way he always thanked the hands personally for jobs well done, how he remembered everyone's birthdays with small gifts, the gentle way he handled the orphaned foal one of the mares had rejected. He was a complicated man, she realized, capable of ruthless action when necessary, but governed by a deep sense of justice and compassion. For his part, Cole seemed more attentive to Sophia as well. He began finding reasons to be in the house more often, checking a loose floorboard, bringing fresh fish from the creek for dinner, asking her opinion on books from his surprisingly extensive library. Their conversations grew longer and more personal, though both carefully avoided certain topics: her fiancé, the dress, whatever shadows lurked in Cole's past. One evening in late July, as Sophia sat on the front porch shelling peas after a particularly hot day, Cole joined her, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. "Mrs. Haggerty said you might be thirsty," he explained, offering her one of the glasses. "Thank you," Sophia accepted gratefully, the cool drink a blessing after hours in the stuffy kitchen. "It's a beautiful evening." It was indeed. The setting sun had painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and a gentle breeze had finally risen to break the day's heat. In the distance, the mountains stood purple against the fiery sky. Cole settled into the rocking chair beside her, stretching his long legs out before him. He had removed his boots, she noticed, and wore only socks on his feet, a small domestic detail that seemed strangely intimate. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said after a comfortable silence. "There's a social in town next Saturday, dance, potluck supper, that sort of thing. I was wondering if you might like to attend." "Mrs. Haggerty usually goes to visit with her friends, and several of the hands will be there too." Sophia's hands stilled in their work. "Are you asking me to accompany you?" Cole looked slightly uncomfortable, a rare sight. "I suppose I am, yes, as friends, of course. I thought you might enjoy a change of scenery, meet some of the other folks from around these parts." Sophia considered for a moment. She hadn't left the ranch since her arrival nearly 2 months earlier, and the prospect of music and dancing was appealing. But going with Cole, even as friends, felt significant somehow. "I'd like that," she finally said, resuming her shelling, "though I'm afraid I don't have anything suitable to wear to a dance." Cole seemed to relax at her acceptance. "I'm sure Mrs. Haggerty can help with that. She's quite handy with a needle, and there are trunks of fabric in the attic from when I used to order supplies for the whole ranch." "You thought of everything, didn't you?" Sophia teased gently, a smile tugged at his lips. "I try to, though you've proven remarkably adept at surprising me." "Have I?" She raised an eyebrow. He nodded, taking a sip of his lemonade. "I expected you to be homesick for Boston for one thing, to find ranch life too harsh." "I was ready for a change," Sophia said simply. "Boston held too many memories." Cole studied her face in the fading light. "Your fiancé?" he asked quietly. She nodded, surprised that he'd brought up the subject they'd both avoided. "Yes, Thomas. He died of typhoid 3 months ago, 2 weeks before our wedding." She kept her tone matter-of-fact, though saying his name still sent a pang through her heart. "I'm sorry," Cole said, and the simple sincerity in his voice was more comforting than all the elaborate condolences she'd received back east. "So am I," Sophia replied. "He was a good man. We'd known each other since childhood." She looked down at the half-filled bowl of peas in her lap. "That's why I had the dress. It was made for a wedding that never happened." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns," he finally said. "Sometimes cruel ones, but occasionally." He paused, looking out at the darkening landscape. "Occasionally the detours lead us somewhere better than we could have imagined." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning Sophia wasn't sure she was ready to examine too closely. "The dance sounds lovely," she said, deliberately changing the subject. "I haven't danced in ages." Cole accepted the shift in conversation gracefully. "I should warn you, I'm not particularly skilled at it myself. My mother tried to teach me, but I fear I was a hopeless case." "I find that hard to believe," Sophia smiled. "You move too gracefully to be a poor dancer." As soon as the words left her mouth, she wished she could recall them. Had she really just commented on the way he moved? Heat rose to her cheeks, and she was grateful for the deepening dusk that hid her blush. If Cole noticed her embarrassment, he was kind enough not to mention it. You'll have to reserve judgment until Saturday, he said lightly. Though I warn you, your toes may be at risk. They fell into comfortable conversation after that, talking about the upcoming cattle drive to Kansas City. The new schoolteacher expected in Silver Creek come fall, the foal that was finally beginning to thrive. By the time full darkness had fallen, Sophia realized she had never felt so at ease with anyone, not even Thomas. The thought was unsettling. I should head inside, she said abruptly, gathering her bowl of peas. Early morning tomorrow. Cole rose immediately. Of course, may I? He reached for the bowl, his fingers brushing against hers as he took it. Thank you, she murmured, acutely aware of his proximity in the darkness. They walked to the door together, the only sound the chirping of crickets and the soft creak of the porch boards beneath their feet. At the threshold, Cole paused. Good night, Sophia, he said softly, his voice lower than usual. Sleep well. Good night, Cole, she replied, her own voice barely above a whisper. For a moment she thought he might say something more, might even move closer. But then he simply handed her the bowl and stepped back, allowing her to enter the house first. She felt his eyes on her back as she moved toward the kitchen, and something in her wanted to turn around to see what might be written on his face in the dim light of the oil lamps. But she continued on, placing the peas in the kitchen and heading upstairs to her room. Later, lying in bed listening to the distant howl of a coyote, Sophia admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with Cole Westcott. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. It seemed too soon after Thomas, too precarious given her position as Cole's employee, too risky when she had no idea if he felt the same. And yet, as she drifted toward sleep, his words echoed in her mind, keep the dress. You'll wear it for me. The day of the social dawned clear and hot, promising another scorcher. Sophia spent the morning helping Mrs. Haggerty prepare food to bring to the potluck: fried chicken, potato salad, and 3 apple pies that had become Sophia's specialty. In the afternoon, she tried on the dress Mrs. Haggerty had altered for her from fabric found in the attic, a lovely pale blue cotton with a pattern of tiny white flowers. The housekeeper had worked miracles with it, creating a gown with a fitted bodice, elbow-length sleeves, and a full skirt that swished pleasingly when Sophia moved. You look beautiful, child, Mrs. Haggerty declared when Sophia emerged from behind the screen in her bedroom. That color brings out your eyes, something wonderful. Sophia examined herself in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. Her skin had taken on a golden hue from working outdoors, and her cheeks had a healthy flush that no amount of pinching had ever achieved back in Boston. Her hair, which she wore twisted up during work, now fell in soft waves past her shoulders, catching the light with hints of auburn and gold. Thank you for the dress, she said, turning to hug the older woman impulsively. It's perfect. Mrs. Haggerty patted her back affectionately. You deserve nice things, Sophia. You work harder than any girl I've ever known, and you never complain, not even when your hands were raw from scrubbing those first weeks. Sophia pulled back, embarrassed by the praise. The work is satisfying, and everyone has been so kind to me here. Especially Mr. Westcott, Mrs. Haggerty observed with a knowing look. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. He's kind to everyone. The housekeeper hummed noncommittally. Not quite the same way, I'd say, but never mind that now, we should finish getting ready. The wagons will be leaving in an hour. By late afternoon, 3 wagons were loaded with people and food, heading towards Silver Creek. Cole drove the lead wagon himself, with Mrs. Haggerty and Sophia beside him on the seat. Sophia was acutely conscious of his presence, the breadth of his shoulders beneath his crisp white shirt, the clean scent of soap and leather that surrounded him, the way his knee occasionally brushed against hers as the wagon jolted over uneven ground. He had cleaned up impressively for the occasion, his dark hair still damp from washing, his face clean-shaven, his usual work clothes replaced by dark trousers, a white shirt, and a black vest that emphasized the width of his chest and the leanness of his waist. When he had first caught sight of Sophia in her blue dress, something had flashed in his eyes: surprise, admiration, perhaps even desire, before he'd composed his features into a polite smile. You look lovely, he'd said simply, offering his hand to help her into the wagon. Thank you, she'd replied, hoping he couldn't feel the trembling in her fingers as they rested briefly against his palm. You look quite handsome yourself. Now, as they approached the town, Sophia felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. This would be the first time she'd been seen publicly with Cole, the first time she'd meet many of the people from surrounding ranches and farms. What would they think of her? Would they know she had come to the Circle W in desperate circumstances? Would they assume there was more between her and Cole than an employer-employee relationship? Nervous, Cole asked quietly, seeming to read her thoughts. A little, she admitted. I haven't been to a social gathering in quite some time. You'll do fine, he assured her. These are good people for the most part, and anyone who isn't good knows better than to show it around me. There was a hint of steel beneath the light tone that reminded Sophia of his confrontation with the rustlers. The social was being held in and around Silver Creek's small town hall, a plain wooden building that had been transformed for the occasion with bunting, paper lanterns, and tables laden with food. A small band was setting up on a platform at one end of the hall, tuning instruments and testing the makeshift dance floor. As they pulled up, Sophia saw that many people had already arrived. Women in their best dresses were arranging food on the tables. Men were gathered in small groups talking and laughing, and children darted between the adults, playing some complicated game of tag. Cole brought the wagon to a halt and jumped down, coming around to help Mrs. Haggerty and then Sophia descend. As Sophia's feet touched the ground, his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary, causing her breath to catch. "Miss Calloway," a familiar voice called out. Sophia turned to see the baker Joe approaching with a smile. "Good to see you again. You're looking well. Ranch life must agree with you, Mr. Peterson," Sophia greeted him warmly. "Yes, it does, thank you." "Joe was telling everyone how you two met," Cole said, his voice neutral but his eyes twinkling with amusement. "I believe the story grows more dramatic with each telling." The baker had the grace to look sheepish. "Well, it's not every day a lady tries to trade a wedding dress for bread and then ends up hired by the most eligible bachelor in the territory." Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm sure the townsfolk have more interesting things to gossip about by now," she said lightly. "Oh, they've moved on to wondering when Mr. Westcott here will finally settle down," Joe grinned, apparently oblivious to the warning look Cole shot him. "His housekeeper isn't getting any younger, you know, and that big house needs a proper mistress." "Joe," Cole said, his tone making the single syllable a clear command to stop talking. "Right, well," the baker cleared his throat, "I should help my wife with our contribution to the potluck. Good to see you both." He beat a hasty retreat toward a plump, pleasant-looking woman arranging pies on one of the tables. An awkward silence fell between Sophia and Cole. "I apologize for Joe," Cole finally said. "He means well, but his mouth runs ahead of his brain sometimes." "There's no need to apologize," Sophia assured him. "Small towns run on gossip. I remember that much from visiting my grandparents in New Hampshire as a child." Cole offered his arm. "Shall we join the festivities? I believe Mrs. Haggerty has already found her friends." He nodded toward where the housekeeper was chatting animatedly with a group of older women. Sophia placed her hand on his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fabric of his shirt. "Lead on." The evening that followed was more enjoyable than Sophia had anticipated. Cole introduced her to what seemed like half the county ranchers and their wives, shopkeepers, the town doctor and his family, the young schoolteacher who would be starting in the fall. Everyone was welcoming, though Sophia noted the speculative glances that followed her and Cole as they moved through the crowd together. The food was plentiful and delicious, the conversation lively, and when the band struck up the first dance, Sophia found herself being led onto the floor by Cole. "Remember, I warned you about my dancing," he murmured as he took her in his arms for a waltz. "I'll risk it," she smiled up at him, her heart beating faster at his proximity. As it turned out, Cole had undersold his abilities. He moved with the same natural grace he showed on horseback, guiding her smoothly around the floor, his hand warm and steady at her waist, his eyes never leaving her face. "You lied," Sophia accused playfully as they twirled past other couples. "You dance beautifully." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Perhaps I simply needed the right partner," The simple compliment sent a rush of warmth through her. For the space of that dance, it was easy to forget all the complications her status as his employee, her still fresh grief for Thomas, whatever shadows lurked in Cole's past. There was only the music, the movement, and the feeling of rightness in his arms. They danced 3 more times throughout the evening, interspersed with conversations with other guests and sampling the vast array of desserts. Cole was pulled away occasionally by men wanting to discuss business or cattle prices, but he always returned to her side, as if drawn by some invisible thread. As the evening wore on and the younger children began to fall asleep on benches or in their parents' laps, the band shifted to slower, more romantic tunes. When Cole asked Sophia for the last dance, there was something different in his eyes, a question perhaps, or a decision made. He held her closer than before as they moved to the gentle strains of a melody Sophia didn't recognize. His hand at her waist seemed to burn through the fabric of her dress, and she was acutely conscious of every point where their bodies touched. "I'm glad you came tonight," he said softly, his voice barely audible above the music. "So am I," she replied, looking up to meet his gaze. Something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing for weeks, perhaps months. Cole's eyes darkened, and his hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Sophia," he began, his voice husky. A commotion at the entrance to the hall interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Heads turned as the town marshal burst in, his expression grim. "Sorry to interrupt the festivities," he called out, his voice cutting through the music, which stuttered to a halt. "But I've just received word that the Blackwood gang has been spotted 10 miles south of town. Everyone should head home immediately and secure your properties. They've been hitting isolated homesteads and small ranches." A murmur of alarm swept through the crowd. Cole's arm tightened protectively around Sophia's waist for a moment before he released her and strode toward the marshal. "How many men are we talking about, Jim?" he asked, his voice carrying in the suddenly quiet hall. "Reports say 4 or 5, the marshal replied. "Including Jake Blackwood himself. They're the 2 that escaped after that business at the Marshall place, plus some new recruits, looks like." Cole nodded grimly. "We'll head out immediately." "Boys," he raised his voice, addressing the ranch hands who had attended the social, "gather at the wagons. We're leaving now." The festive atmosphere evaporated as people hurried to collect their belongings and children. Sophia helped Mrs. Haggerty pack up what remained of their food contributions, trying to ignore the knot of fear in her stomach. The Blackwood gang was notorious for its brutality, and the Circle W would be a tempting target with its large herds and prosperous appearance. As they loaded the last basket into the wagon, Cole appeared at Sophia's side, his expression tense but controlled. "We'll travel together, all 3 wagons," he said. "Safety in numbers. Once we reach the ranch, the hands will set up a watch rotation." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "I know this isn't what you signed on for when you took the job, Sophia, if you'd feel safer in town." "No," she said firmly. "My place is at the ranch. I won't run at the first sign of trouble." A brief smile touched his lips. "I should have known you'd say that. You're braver than most men I've known." "Not brave," Sophia shook her head. "Just stubborn, my mother always said." Cole's expression sobered. "Whatever happens in the next few days, promise me you'll be careful. Follow Mrs. Haggerty's lead. She's been through Indian raids and outlaw gangs before." "I promise," Sophia said. Touched by his concern, he helped her into the wagon, his hands lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. "We'll finish our conversation another time," he said quietly, his eyes conveying what he didn't say aloud. Sophia nodded, her throat suddenly tight with emotion. "I'll hold you to that." The journey back to the ranch was tense and silent, a stark contrast to the lighthearted trip into town earlier that day. The moon had risen, casting the landscape in silver light that made every shadow seem menacing. Cole kept one hand on the reins, the other resting on the rifle laid across his lap. Beside Sophia, Mrs. Haggerty sat straight-backed and alert, her own small derringer clutched in her gnarled hands. They reached the Circle W without incident, but there was no sense of relief as they passed under the arched gateway. Instead, the ranch hands immediately set about securing buildings, checking weapons, and establishing watch positions. Cole issued orders with calm efficiency, his earlier warmth replaced by the steely resolve of a man preparing for battle. As Sophia helped unload the wagons, she caught sight of her reflection in a window. The pretty blue dress now seemed absurdly frivolous in the face of the danger they might be facing. Yet something in her refused to give in to fear. This place had become home in a remarkably short time, and these people Cole, Mrs. Haggerty, even young Tobias had become something like family. She would not allow outlaws to take that from her without a fight. Later that night, as Sophia lay in bed listening to the sounds of men moving about the property, setting up watches, she found herself reaching under her mattress where she had carefully stored her wedding dress. Her fingers traced the delicate beading, the fine silk, as her mind returned to Cole's words at the dance before they'd been interrupted. What had he been about to say? And what would happen now with the threat of violence hanging over them all? Life in the West, she was learning, could change in an instant, joy to fear, safety to danger, life to death. Perhaps that was why people here lived so intensely, loved so fiercely. There was no guarantee of tomorrow. "Keep the dress," she whispered into the darkness, echoing Cole's words from their first meeting. "You'll wear it for me." For the first time, she allowed herself to truly imagine what that might mean. The following days at the Circle W passed in a state of heightened vigilance. Regular ranch work continued. Cattle still needed tending, horses still needed training, meals still needed preparing, but now everything was done with an eye toward security. Men worked in groups, never alone. Rifles were kept within reach at all times. At night, guards were posted around the property, rotating shifts to ensure everyone got some rest. Cole seemed to be everywhere at once, checking fences, drilling the hands on emergency procedures, consulting with neighboring ranchers who rode in to share information. Sophia saw little of him except at meals, where he ate quickly and spoke little, his mind clearly occupied with strategies and contingencies. On the third evening after the social, Sophia was in the kitchen kneading bread dough when she heard the distinctive sound of horses approaching at speed. Wiping her hands on her apron, she moved to the window, peering out into the gathering dusk. A rider was galloping toward the house, another horse trailing behind him. Cole emerged from the barn, rifle in hand, as the rider pulled up in a cloud of dust. Even from a distance, Sophia could see that something was wrong. The second horse had no rider, and the man who had arrived was slumped forward in his saddle, barely staying on. She hurried to the door, reaching it just as Cole and two of the hands helped the injured man from his horse. It was one of the neighboring ranchers, a man named Davis who owned a small spread about 5 miles away. His shirt was soaked with blood, his face ashen beneath its usual tan. "Inside, quickly," Cole ordered, and the men half-carried Davis up the porch steps. "Mrs. Haggerty." Sophia called out, holding the door wide. "We need hot water and bandages." They laid the wounded man on the kitchen table as Mrs. Haggerty hurried in, already rolling up her sleeves. "What happened?" she demanded, examining the bloody wound in Davis's side. "Blackwood," the man gasped, his voice barely audible. "Hit my place, killed 2 of my hands, took my cattle." Cole's expression darkened. "How many men?" "5, Davis managed. Jake Blackwood himself said they were saving the Circle W for last, said to tell you they're coming." A chill ran down Sophia's spine at the words. This wasn't random violence. The Blackwood gang was specifically targeting Cole and his ranch. "When?" Cole asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Didn't say." Davis winced as Mrs. Haggerty began cleaning his wound. "Soon, I reckon." "They're working their way north." Cole straightened, his decision made. "Tobias," he called to the young redhead who had crowded into the doorway with the other hands. "Ride to Silver Creek, tell Marshal Bennett what's happened and that we need men. Then go to the Carter place and the Thompson spread, tell them to bring anyone they can spare." As Tobias hurried out, Cole turned to the rest of his men. "Check all weapons, double the night watch. Move the women and children from the bunkhouses into the main house. It's the sturdiest building if there's a fight." Mrs. Haggerty looked up from her work on Davis. "This is bad, but not fatal if we keep it clean. He'll need to stay here for a few days." Cole nodded. "Do what you can for him." His eyes met Sophia's across the room. "Can I speak with you outside for a moment?" She followed him onto the porch, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The sun had nearly set, painting the landscape in deep purples and blues, the mountains a dark silhouette against the fading light. "I want you to go to town with Tobias," Cole said without preamble, his voice low and urgent. "It's not safe for you here." Sophia blinked in surprise. "What about Mrs. Haggerty and the other women?" "Mrs. Haggerty won't leave. I've tried to send her to safety during troubles before. And the hands, wives and children, they've been through this kind of thing before. They know what to expect." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "But this isn't what you signed on for." "I'm not leaving," Sophia said firmly, lifting her chin. "This is my home now too. I won't abandon it or you when there's danger." Cole's expression softened slightly. "Sophia, these men are killers. What happened at the Marshall place, what they did to Davis, that's just a taste of what they're capable of. All the more reason for every able body to stay and help," she countered. "I can load rifles, tend wounds, keep watch. I'm not helpless, Cole." He studied her face in the fading light, conflict clear in his eyes. Finally, he sighed. "I can see there's no changing your mind, but promise me you'll stay in the house, away from windows if there's an attack." "I promise to be careful," Sophia said, deliberately not agreeing to his exact terms. She had no intention of hiding while others risked their lives. Cole seemed to understand her evasion. A ghost of a smile touched his lips despite the gravity of the situation. "Stubborn woman," he murmured, but there was admiration in his tone. On impulse, Sophia reached out and took his hand. "We'll get through this," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Together." Cole's fingers tightened around hers. For a moment, Sophia thought he might pull her into his arms, might finally say whatever he'd been about to say at the dance. But the sound of approaching footsteps caused him to release her hand and step back. "Mr. Westcott," one of the hands called from the yard. "We've got the extra ammunition distributed and the barn secured." "Good," Cole nodded, his expression returning to that of the capable ranch owner. "I'll be right there." He turned back to Sophia, his eyes conveying what he couldn't say aloud. "Be safe," he said simply, then strode down the porch steps to join his men. Sophia watched him go, her hand still warm from his touch, her heart racing with emotions too complex to name. Whatever happened in the coming days, she knew one thing with certainty. Her place was here, beside this man who had saved her in more ways than one. The night passed without incident, but the tension at the Circle W only increased as dawn broke. By mid-morning, reinforcements had begun to arrive: 6 men from the Carter Ranch, 4 from the Thompsons, and the marshal from Silver Creek with 3 deputies. Each brought news more troubling than the last: another ranch hit during the night, more cattle stolen, a family traumatized. Cole gathered all the men in the yard, assigning positions and discussing strategy. From the kitchen window, Sophia watched him, calm, decisive, respected by men twice his age. Whatever his past contained, it had forged him into a natural leader. Mrs. Haggerty appeared at her side, following her gaze. "He's a good man," the housekeeper said quietly. "Best I've ever worked for, cares more about his people than himself." "I know," Sophia replied simply. The older woman studied her face. "You love him." It wasn't a question, but Sophia answered anyway. "Yes, I think I do," Mrs. Haggerty nodded, unsurprised. "I thought as much. And he feels the same. Anyone with eyes can see it." She sighed. "Bad timing with these outlaws, but then life rarely arranges itself for our convenience." "Has he said anything to you?" Sophia couldn't help asking. "He doesn't need to," Mrs. Haggerty snorted. "I've known that boy for 7 years. Never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." She patted Sophia's arm. "Just be patient. Men sometimes need time to sort out their feelings, especially men like him who carry old wounds." Before Sophia could ask what she meant by old wounds, the kitchen door opened and several of the hands' wives entered, children in tow. The conversation turned to practical matters: where everyone would sleep, how to stretch the food supplies, which children needed special attention. The day wore on with no sign of the Blackwood gang, but no one relaxed their vigilance. As darkness fell once again, Sophia helped serve a simple dinner to the defenders: beef stew and bread that could be eaten quickly if necessary. Cole ate standing up, conferring with the marshal between bites, his expression grim. After the meal, as Sophia was washing dishes, she felt a presence behind her and turned to find Cole in the doorway, watching her. "You should get some rest," he said. Take my room upstairs, it's the safest in the house, no windows facing the approach to the ranch. Where will you sleep? She asked. I won't much, he admitted. I'll catch an hour or two on the sofa in my study between watches. Sophia dried her hands on a towel. You need rest too, you can't defend the ranch if you're exhausted. A tired smile touched his lips, always practical. Don't worry about me, I've gone longer without sleep during roundups. They stood looking at each other across the kitchen, so much unsaid between them. Finally, Cole took a step forward. Sophia, if anything happens. He began, she raised a hand to stop him. Don't, nothing's going to happen. But if it does, he persisted, moving closer until he stood directly before her. I need you to know something. Sophia's heart hammered in her chest as she looked up into his eyes, seeing the emotion there that matched her own. What? She whispered. Cole reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. From the moment I saw you in that bakery, something changed for me. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. His thumb traced her cheekbone, feather light. I love you, Sophia Calloway. Whatever happens, I wanted you to know that. Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes as joy and fear warred within her. I love you too, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I think I have almost from the beginning. Cole's eyes darkened at her words. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he lowered his head until his lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it made her heart ache. His hand slid from her cheek to cradle the back of her head, his other arm encircling her waist to draw her closer. Sophia responded with all the emotion she'd been holding back for weeks, her arms winding around his neck, her body fitting perfectly against his. The kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent, more passionate, a promise of everything that could be if they survived the coming danger. A discreet cough from the doorway caused them to break apart. Mrs. Haggerty stood there, her expression a mixture of approval and apology. Marshall Bennett is looking for you, Mr. Westcott, she said, studiously examining a spot on the ceiling. Says he spotted movement at the north pasture. Cole's expression immediately shifted back to that of the ranch owner. Thank you, Mrs. Haggerty. He turned back to Sophia, his eyes still warm despite his now businesslike tone. We'll continue this conversation later. We will, she agreed, trying to compose herself. With a last lingering look, Cole strode from the kitchen, already calling out orders to the men in the yard. Mrs. Haggerty watched him go, then turned to Sophia with a raised eyebrow. About time, she said dryly. Now come help me prepare bandages. If there's going to be trouble tonight, we should be ready. The attack, when it came, was not the frontal assault they had expected. Shortly after midnight, as Sophia was dozing in a chair in the parlor, unable to bring herself to use Cole's room as he'd suggested, a shout went up from one of the guards. Fire, the south barn. She rushed to the window to see flames already licking at the roof of the barn furthest from the house. Men were running toward it, Cole among them, as others maintained their positions, guns trained on the darkness surrounding the ranch. It's a diversion, Mrs. Haggerty said grimly, appearing at Sophia's side. They want to draw the men away from the house. Even as she spoke, gunfire erupted from the direction of the creek, followed by shouts and more shots. Through the window, Sophia could see muzzle flashes in the darkness, hear the terrified whinnies of horses and the commands being shouted by Cole and the marshal. Get away from the windows, Mrs. Haggerty ordered, pulling Sophia back. Help me get the women and children into the root cellar. For the next hour, chaos reigned. Gunfire continued intermittently, punctuated by shouts and the crackling of the burning barn. From the relative safety of the house, Sophia helped calm frightened children, distributed ammunition to the men who came in for it, and assisted Mrs. Haggerty in treating a deputy who'd taken a bullet to the shoulder. Then, suddenly, the shooting stopped. An eerie silence fell over the ranch, broken only by the distant sound of the fire, which the hands had managed to contain to just the one barn. Sophia stood in the hallway, straining to hear what was happening outside. Footsteps on the porch made her tense, but then the door opened to reveal Cole, his face streaked with soot, a bloody gash across his forehead but otherwise intact. It's over, he announced to the anxious faces watching him. They're gone. 3 dead, 2 wounded and captured, including Jake Blackwood himself. A cheer went up from the defenders, but Sophia could only stare at the blood dripping down Cole's temple. She grabbed a clean cloth from the stack of bandages and moved to his side. "You're hurt," she said, pressing the cloth to his wound. He winced slightly but didn't pull away. "It's nothing. Bullet grazed me. Could have been much worse." His eyes searched her face. "You're all right. I'm fine," she assured him. "Everyone in the house is safe." Cole's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank God. We lost one man, one of the Carter hands, 2 others wounded, but they'll recover." As the adrenaline of the fight began to fade, Sophia could see the exhaustion etched in Cole's face, the weight of responsibility for all these lives. Without thinking, she reached up and smoothed the hair back from his forehead, a gesture of tenderness that drew curious glances from the others in the hallway. "You need rest," she said firmly, "and this wound needs cleaning properly." A small smile touched his lips despite his fatigue. "Yes, madam." For the rest of the night, Sophia moved between tasks helping Mrs. Haggerty tend the wounded, preparing food for hungry men coming in from securing the property, cleaning Cole's injury while he gave his report to the marshal. Dawn was breaking by the time the immediate needs were addressed, and a semblance of calm returned to the ranch. Cole found her on the back porch, where she had stepped out for a moment of quiet after the chaos. The sun was just peeking over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that belied the violence of the night. "It's beautiful," he said softly, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "After a night like that, it's hard to believe the sun still rises the same way." Sophia nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "Is everything secure now, as it can be?" Cole sighed. "The marshal's taking Blackwood and the other prisoner to Silver Creek later today. The threat should be over. What's left of the gang will move on to easier targets." He ran a hand through his hair, wincing slightly as his fingers brushed the bandage on his temple. "The barn can be rebuilt. The cattle they stole from Davis and the others. Some we'll recover, some we won't. And the man who died?" Sophia asked gently. Cole's expression darkened. "Frank Miller. Good man, wife, and 2 kids. I'll make sure they're taken care of." His jaw tightened. "That's the hardest part of being responsible for others, knowing that sometimes, no matter what you do, people get hurt." Sophia placed her hand over his where it rested on the railing. "You did everything you could. Everyone here knows that." He turned his hand to clasp hers, his gaze shifting from the sunrise to her face. "Last night before the attack, what I said to you. You said you loved me," Sophia reminded him softly. "I meant it," Cole said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I know it hasn't been long, and I know you're still healing from your loss. I don't expect—" Sophia pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. "I meant what I said too," she told him. "I love you, Cole." "I didn't expect it, didn't even want it at first, but it happened anyway." She smiled slightly. "Life takes unexpected turns, as someone once told me." Cole's expression lightened, hope replacing the worry in his eyes. He drew her closer, his arms encircling her waist. "When I first saw you with that wedding dress in Joe's bakery, something just clicked. I knew I needed to help you, needed to bring you here. It made no sense at the time." "And when you said I'd wear it for you?" Sophia asked, her heart beating faster. A smile tugged at his lips. "That part surprised me as much as you." The words just came out. His expression grew more serious. "But I meant them, Sophia. If you'll have me, I want to make a life with you here, not as my housekeeper's assistant, but as my wife." Joy bubbled up within her, so intense it almost hurt. "Are you proposing, Cole Westcott?" "I am," he confirmed, his eyes never leaving hers. "Not very romantically, I'm afraid, covered in soot and blood with a half-burned barn in the background." Sophia laughed, the sound bright in the morning air. "I think it's perfectly romantic." "Very much in keeping with our unconventional beginning." Cole's smile widened, revealing the dimple in his right cheek that she had come to adore. "Is that a yes, then?" In answer, Sophia rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that conveyed everything words could not: love, acceptance, promise of a future together. Cole responded immediately, his arms tightening around her, one hand sliding up to cradle the back of her head as he deepened the kiss. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I'll take that as a yes," he murmured. Sophia smiled. "Yes, Cole Westcott, I will marry you, and yes, I will wear that dress for you." 3 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Sophia stood in what was now her bedroom in the main house of the Circle W Ranch. Staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror Cole had ordered from Denver as an engagement gift. The wedding dress, carefully stored for so long, now adorned her figure as it was always meant to do. Mrs. Haggerty had made a few alterations, taking in the waist slightly, adding fresh lace at the collar that had yellowed with age, replacing a few missing pearls on the bodice. But it was essentially the same dress Sophia had nearly traded for bread on that desperate day that now seemed a lifetime ago. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Haggerty said, adjusting the veil carefully over Sophia's honey-brown curls. "Like an angel." Sophia smiled at the older woman in the mirror. "Thank you for everything, the dress, your guidance, your friendship." Mrs. Haggerty sniffed, blinking back tears. "None of that now. You'll have me crying, and then my eyes will be all red for the ceremony." But she squeezed Sophia's hand affectionately. "I always hoped he'd find someone worthy of him, someone who could see past the ranch owner to the man beneath. I'm glad it was you." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Tobias's voice called through, "Ladies, everyone's ready and waiting." "Mr. Westcott looks like he might wear a hole in the ground with his pacing." Sophia laughed, her heart full to bursting with happiness. "Tell him I'll be right down." Mrs. Haggerty handed her the bouquet of late wildflowers gathered from the hills around the ranch that morning. "Ready?" she asked. "More than ready," Sophia nodded. The ceremony was held in the front yard of the ranch house, under an arch of autumn foliage constructed by the hands. Nearly everyone from Silver Creek and the surrounding ranches had come to witness the marriage of Cole Westcott to the woman who had appeared in their town with nothing but a wedding dress to trade for bread. As Sophia walked down the makeshift aisle on the arm of Marshall Bennett, who had volunteered to give her away in the absence of her father, she had eyes only for Cole. He stood waiting for her, more handsome than she had ever seen him in a new black suit. His gray eyes fixed on her with such love and wonder that it took her breath away. When she reached him, he took her hands in his fingers warm and steady. "You kept it," he murmured, looking at her dress with a smile that made her heart skip. "And you're wearing it for me." "Just as you said I would," Sophia replied softly. The preacher, brought in from Silver Creek for the occasion, cleared his throat and began the ceremony. But Sophia barely heard the familiar words, too lost in the promise of Cole's eyes, the feel of his hands holding hers, the future they would build together. When it came time for their vows, Cole spoke with a conviction that carried clearly to everyone gathered. "Sophia, when I first met you, you were ready to give away this beautiful dress for mere bread. Today, you wear it as my bride, and I promise you'll never know that kind of desperation again." His voice deepened with emotion. "I promise to protect you, provide for you, honor you, and love you all the days of my life. This ranch, everything I have, everything I am, it's all yours to share." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she responded. "Cole, you saw me at my lowest moment and offered me not just help, but dignity and hope. You gave me a home when I had none, purpose when I was lost, and love when I thought my heart would never heal." She squeezed his hands. "I promise to stand by your side through whatever life brings us, good harvests and bad, peace and danger, joy and sorrow. I will love you, support you, and cherish you until my last breath." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Cole drew her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promises and drew cheers and whistles from the assembled guests. Sophia laughed against his lips, feeling lighter than air, happier than she had ever imagined possible. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, a feast spread across tables in the yard, music and dancing, toasts and well wishes from friends and neighbors. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the festivities. During a quiet moment, as they stood slightly apart from the others watching the dancing, Cole slipped his arm around Sophia's waist. "Happy, Mrs. Westcott?" he asked, his voice warm in her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly, leaning into his embrace. "And you?" "More than I deserve," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "When I think how close I came to not walking into that bakery that day," Sophia turned in his arms to face him. "But you did, and here we are." Cole's eyes were serious as he gazed down at her. "I want you to know something. That dress." He glanced at the ivory silk that gleamed in the lantern light. It brought you to me and I'll always be grateful for that, but it's not what matters. What matters is you, your strength, your kindness, your stubborn determination." His lips quirked in a smile. "I would have loved you just as much in calico as in silk." Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes once more. "I know," she whispered. "That's why I love you." As they rejoined the celebration, accepting congratulations and well wishes from their guests, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the depths of despair in that bakery to the heights of joy on her wedding day, all because a kind-hearted cowboy had looked at a desperate woman with compassion rather than pity and had seen in her something worth saving. "Keep the dress," he had said. "You'll wear it for me," and so she had. But the dress was just the beginning of their story, the first thread in the tapestry of a life they would weave together, day by day, season by season, year by year, on this land that had become their home.